being in the world of trying to help people improve their lives, I get a little skittish when I hear these gurus say, if you only follow this 7-step plan, you can change your life. You can revolutionize your life. You can make a big difference. You can turn it all around. In the real world, that doesn't happen as often as the gurus would have us believe. And one of the benefits of doing a podcast where you're not getting paid and you don't really care that much about the number of views you get. Sure, you want people to watch you, but you want it above everything. You have the luxury of keeping your integrity if you don't worry about page views or views of this podcast. So the one thing you're going to get from me is at least my best take about what's realistic. So here's what I'm going to do with you today. I'm going to share with you a composite life story of a person who, by the time they reach midlife, says, you know what, I'm thinking of hanging it up. Not committing suicide, but disengaging from life and just kind of doing the minimum to get through the day. And then I'm going to, this is paradoxical, I'm going to make the case for why that's okay. But then, because it is sometimes possible to improve your life incrementally or even dramatically, I'm going to offer a bunch of suggestions for how somebody who's at the brink of disengagement from life might do things differently regarding their career or lack thereof, their relationships or lack thereof, money or lack thereof, their physical health, lack thereof, mental health, lack thereof, avocations, that is recreations, hobbies, or lack thereof, and even come up with some kind of a meaning of life definition that makes them want to keep on, if only in a modest way. So that's the plan. We'll see how well I do it. Those of you who don't know, this is not at all scripted. These are, I've been a career and personal coach to thousands of people at this point, over 36 years. And what I believe that what remains top of mind is what's going to be ultimately most useful to you. So I've got about 3 lines of notes in front of me, and that's it. But it's what's coming out of my brain is going to be the most authentic and hopefully the most helpful to you. Okay, first, the composite story. It's a life story I'm going to tell you. So let's call this person David, as in David and Goliath. And David, from when he was a little kid, he was never liked because he was a big mouth, but not good looking, not great. He didn't have great emotional intelligence. He was smart, but he ended up always being on the outside. So he did okay in school, but even there he was, a typical hyperactive boy, couldn't sit still. And so the teachers didn't like him. Yeah, he got good grades in the academics. Grudgingly, the teachers gave him good grades, but he got terrible grades for, social behavior. And the kids didn't like him. He wasn't very athletic. He was not, as I said, had poor social skills. And he was weak. He was a little skinny weakling who was also by temperament, I guess he wouldn't have used the word peace-loving at that point, but he was not a fighter. He was not a conflict guy. And so kids would take that as a sign of weakness and beat the hell out of this guy. He was beaten up all the time because he was this brainiac person. He was in a school that was kind of blue collar, and he was the the smart kid with his hand shooting up because that was the only way he could get some affirmation. His parents were indeed blue collar. Father worked on road construction. The mother was a stay-at-home mom, and they lived in a dingy apartment in not quite a slum, but one level above. It wasn't a happy place. He had very few friends, if any. His friends were very casual. He was the kind of kid who on Valentine's Day, when all the other kids were giving away, even when the teacher says, you must give a Valentine's Day card to every kid, he would either not get one or sign with the most obligatory, just the person, signed Susan. But instead of saying, you're a good friend, Susan, or anything, it was just, so it was clear he was always on the outside. And this continued through high school, where we saw kids starting to date, and the juice of sexuality coming alive in everybody. And he was just very restrained in every way because he just didn't feel like he was part of that world or any world. So he lost even motivation to do well in school. So even though he was bright, he just ended up doing the minimum, and he had like a B average in high school. He was completely anonymous. He ended up being quiet, didn't raise his hand so much because he got so punished for doing that by the kids when he was in elementary school. So he just kind of sat there, got his B average without a lot of work. And when he came home from school, he would listen to music and do nothing, watch TV. And then because even though he was quite bright, because he wasn't that diligent a student, he got into only a mediocre college, and he went, and there as well, he didn't do a whole lot. He actually just went and did his work moderately. He got a B average in college as well. He wasn't a genius. He wasn't stupid. He majored in sociology, so he could get passing grades without a whole lot of work. He didn't have girls flirting with him. He didn't have many friends at all. People were polite to him at this point because he was so restrained. But that was it. And when he graduated, he had no idea what in the world he wanted to do. And so he went back and lived with his parents again. He had lived in a fraternity where he was admitted, but it was always on the outs. He was never part of the in crowd. And after graduating, he went and lived back with his parents, and finally got a job working for the post office, where he's delivering mail, and where he could have these little interactions that weren't risky, and people were always glad to see him. Except one time he actually got robbed delivering mail in an apartment building, and they took everything. They took his mail bag, they took everything, and took his own personal money and whatever. And that was almost kind of a last straw. He says, "This is the world. This is my world. What am I going to do?" And so by the time he was 30, he was not comatose or not, catatonic. He was just numb. It wasn't like he was physiologically depressed. His native nature was to be medium. Not happy-go-lucky, but not depressed. But he just didn't work well in the world. So he continued to live with his parents. And his parents got older. He dutifully took care of them as his father developed a heart condition, and his mother developed diabetes, and he gained weight, and he got not quite obese, but significantly overweight, and then started to drink a lot and then do more weed, which he had started in college, and then gave it up and started again, and gave it up and started again. And then at age 35, his life was, he's saying, I don't know what to do. I can't go on. I hate it. I embarrass myself now, because now his social skills were arrested. He didn't develop them like most kids in college. He just didn't have much interaction. So he was embarrassed when he tried to ask a woman out for a date, and because he was so nervous, that was very off-putting to the girls, women. So he rarely got a date, and the only dates he got were with, let's just say, women who weren't very prepossessing, and he didn't have the stomach to date them. He went on first dates with a number of them, but in the end felt too embarrassed to be he felt that would be being with such, let's just say, unprepossessing women, that would even make him more depressed, and he felt he couldn't even be a good partner. So he just lived with his parents, took care of them dutifully as they got older and more frail, and just basically metaphorically sat there. Okay, so that's certainly I think it's a very sad problem, but it may not be as unusual as those of you who have a nice life and are things are pretty good. It may seem extreme, but as somebody who's been a career coach, yes, to a lot of very successful people, but to some people who create the veneer of success and happiness. But underneath, they're not that dissimilar from this person. Anyway, that's an example of somebody. And now what I want to talk about is how if I am the career coach, the personal coach, the life coach, whatever to this person, I want to talk about the kind of questions that I would ask this person. I'm going to take a brief break. I hope you stay with me, and I'll be back and talk about questions leading him to either acceptance of his life is not so bad, or some ways that aren't too difficult, because this guy's not going to be super motivated to work on career or relationships or money, but I'm going to try to ask questions that would lead him to some simple, relatively simple approaches to improving his life. Stay with me. Thank you very much for staying with me. As those of you just joining me, I've described in the first 11 minutes of this a composite story of somebody who got ever more embarrassed, alienated from society, dispirited, and is basically sitting there in with his aging parents' house, doing very, very little. Not suicidal, but really just going through the minimum motions of life. And so now, if I were his coach, life coach, I hate that word life coach because it implies a certain lack of skills, which only sometimes is true. I like to think that maybe I'm not so skillless in that area. First, so I'm going to ask some questions first before I launch into asking him questions that might improve his life. It's usually wise to not fight him, but to accept his decisions as they are and see if he can be a little more accepting of it or whatever. So the first question I would ask him is this. You've been alive 35 years, and the way in which you live your life is the sum total of your experiences, your beliefs, the feedback you've gotten from the world. Are you, at this point, okay with your life as is? If it is, please, I'm not here to fix you, we'll just accept you and realize, maybe feeling some gratitude for whatever good there is. You seem currently still healthy, you're not homeless, all that crap that my mother used to tell me, people are starving in Africa. So do you want just to basically accept your life and look for the positives in them and be grateful? Or would you like me to ask you some questions that might improve things, perhaps incrementally, just a bit, just in little bits, or perhaps dramatically? So let's assume that he wants me to ask him some questions. So these are the questions I would ask regarding career. So I'd start with, he's as those of you who were listening before, he was working, he had a job in the post office, which had great job security and middle-class pay and benefits and pension, even all those things. So I would start by asking him, they say, how do you eat an elephant? A bite at a time. How do you eat a salami? A slice at a time. Do you want to stay in the post office? And I'm going to make up answers here so we have something to interact with. So let's say he says, yeah, I want to stay here, but I'm tired of, I'm getting a little bored of just delivering mail all the time. So I would ask him some questions. I say, is there a path forward? Where have other people who are bright like you are, but maybe don't have the greatest social skills, where have such people moved to from being a delivery, mail delivery guy? And I would listen to his answer, and I would ask him something like, do you want to do anything to make that happen? Do you want to apply for jobs? Do you want to talk to HR? Do you want to talk to somebody who's in that career? And I would, whatever he wanted to do, I would, of course, I would not push him to do it. I'd say, okay, why don't you jot that down as something you may or may not want to do? Then I would say, well, in the meantime, especially in government jobs, it could take a long time to get that new job. You're going to be in this current job for a while. Is there one thing you want to do differently to make your life better? And let's say he was stuck and he couldn't come up with an answer. I'd say, well, here's some choices. Do any of these resonate with you? Do you want to, you said you were attacked in an apartment building. Would a change of route be possible, and would that make you feel better, maybe less scared in delivering the mail? Do you want to actually be either, you look in good shape? Do you want to take advantage of that and have a more vigorous delivery route or less so? Are there favorite customers that you maybe want to make little conversation with? I know you're not Mr. Social, but might that enhance your pleasure? So I'd ask him a few questions about making the most of his current job, little tweaks, while he's waiting for a possible pivot into another job. After I finished that, and I would say, well, let's say I'm making this up, but let's say he said he'd really like to be a manager and develop better social skills. And I say, what is your way? Let's say we called him David. David, would your way be to simply observe people who are good managers and take notes and see what you might do differently? Would you want to read an article that you might get on management that you just from Googling? Would you want to take an online class, with very high ratings, and with the high ratings not just coming from because the instructor is entertaining, but that the course was very beneficial? So I'd ask him those kind of few questions. Okay. Then I would turn to relationships. I would say, you're living with your parents, you've not had good experiences with relationships. Do you want to accept that as is? Or is there anything you want to change? In other words, to try to meet either a platonic friend or a romantic partner or both. So let's say he wants, he's not going to be jumping up and down with enthusiasm, but let's say he says he wouldn't mind to have both. So I would start with the romantic, and I would say, given your experiences, limited though they may be, what, if anything, is central in the right woman for you? And I wouldn't assume he was straight, but let's just assume that we had that little conversation and he's straight. And let's say he said the most important thing, this wouldn't surprise me, is kindness, because he's been so beaten up by the world. So I say, great. And so I would try a trial balloon. I would say, of course people of all stripes and all personalities enter a variety of careers, but generally I've found that some of the kinder people are teachers, social workers, nurses, librarians. Do any of those appeal to you? So let's say he said, yeah, he likes the idea of librarians. So I said, is it too audacious of me to ask you to be audacious enough to visit a few libraries and watch people and maybe even make a little conversation? Start by asking for, a book on whatever, ancient Roman history or whatever it is that you're into, or maybe even post office. Maybe I imagine there's a post office management study book or something. You could ask for that, and see if there's any kind of kindness in the vibe and also attraction. And then, do you want to see if you had if a person felt possible? Do you want to gently ask if she'd like to go out for coffee? You don't need to push things. You don't need to push hard. You don't need to be a great conversationalist. You need to be a good listener. You need to be kind and assertive enough at least to say, would you like to go out for coffee? So is that something you might like to do? And he said, I'll think about it. Now, again, if I was lucky, I'll plant seeds. If not, he's going to blow me off. But I wanted to give him, since he says he wants to try to at least consider improving his life, I wanted to at least give him some not very demanding approaches to meeting someone. I might offer, because people like to have choices. So let's say I felt he was lukewarm and he wasn't going to jump up and down to run to libraries to meet the librarians. I would say, very often the people who know you best and care about you are the people who are going to be able to set you up with somebody good. Now I notice you've been living with your parents most of the time. Do you want to, and have you already, asked your parents, if they could find somebody to set you up with, or any other relatives or any other people you know? And whatever he said, I would let it drop. I planted a seed. I can only gently ask him for his own ideas, and I would probably start with that. I would have said, what's worked with you at all to try to have a relationship, romantic or not? And if he was stuck, then I would offer those suggestions gently that weren't hard, and just let him plant seeds. If he said no, if he said yeah maybe, and we don't know whether he's going to follow through or not, but I would I would do that. And on the friend side, let's say one of the nicer ways to make friends that isn't too stressful, it's not like you're going to go up and be Mr. Gladhander, is there a hobby or something that you like or could like that where you join a group and then over the course of meeting after meeting after meeting, slowly, without pressure, you get to know someone, and maybe at that point, either they'll say, hey, you want to go out and see a movie, or hey, you want to go play ball, or go have a drink, or whatever it is. So I would ask him, what kind of things he's interested in. So I'm just making this up. Let's say he said he's always liked soccer, but hasn't played a whole lot. Well, and I would ask him then, okay, is there a local community soccer league, or is there a soccer class that he'd want to take, or something through the local recreation department, whatever. And then I'd probably let it go. I didn't want to overwhelm him. I'd probably give him one or two choices. If he didn't come up with them himself, again, I'd always ask first if he wanted to come up with them himself. And then I let it go. So now we looked at career, we looked at romantic relationships, platonic relationships. So now we talk a little bit about money. And I would simply say, are you satisfied with your financial situation? And he might be, given that he's working for the post office. He's had worked for quite a while. He's a full-time employee. But let's say he said no, he can't. He tends to drown his. Instead of saving, putting in money into his 401k or whatever it is, retirement plan, he tends to, as I said, he tends to drink and do weed, and he's spending a lot of money, on $10 drinks and crap like that. And again, I wouldn't call it crap like that, but I don't want him to feel judged. And I'd say, are you feeling good about how you're spending your money? And I might ask, if he says no, and I really wish I could save more. I said, what do you think could work to help you fund that 401k that you said you would like to fund? Would you see if you can get it automatically taken out of your check and deposited into, say, a Vanguard account? Do you want to just make a rule to yourself that you're going to take $10 and put them in a savings account in a bank? Or you're going to piggy bank. It's not that large an amount of money, but the amount of interest is significant. And I would just let it go. And again, I don't want to overwhelm him. And all this might not occur in one session at all. It might. It all depends on the person's pace. I'd be watching him carefully to see if I'm overwhelming him, or is this series of low effort ideas for improving his life, is each one making him more enthusiastic? I'd then turn to physical health, and I'd say, you look in great shape, you're not overweight, are you pleased with your physical health? And if he said, yeah, but probably since he said he did a lot of weed and alcohol, I say, you mentioned that you wish you didn't spend so much on the alcohol and to enable you to save money. Do you feel okay about your level of substance abuse in terms of, is it making you more depressed? Are you bored? Do you want to replace some of that using substances to address your boredom instead with one or more avocations? And I would ask open-ended, and then if he said, I don't know, maybe, then I'd say, do any of these come to mind? A sport other than soccer, or some more soccer, playing a musical instrument, writing, painting, photography, craft work, something with your hands. Had a client who made chips in a bottle. So I would just tick off some with no sense that I was trying to push him into something. Just laying out the choices so that he has all the agency, he has all the power in the discussion. Then I would ask him about exercise, how he feels about exercise. Again, does he want to take up a sport? Does he want to walk? Does he want to run? Does he want to bicycle? Does he want to do nothing? Whatever. Let's say, yeah, I like walking. I'd say, okay, how could you ritualize that? You want to walk more so that it gets built into your day. Is that you walk a ton already as a post office delivery guy. Do you want to do more walking? It's up to you. He says, yeah, that's my favorite thing to do. That's why I became a post office guy, delivery guy. So I'll say, where would you like to walk to? Do you want to do it right after dinner, right before dinner, every other day, Saturday mornings, by yourself? Maybe a new friend you'll make will be something you would take walks together, walks in nature, walks in a shopping area, whatever. again, choices. I love to first ask him the open-ended question because he'll come up with things maybe, and often does, that I would never have thought of. But those are better fits for him. But if he's stuck, I love giving choices. So that way, because I've had so many clients, I have lots of ideas in my head, and laying them out makes it easier for him to point and pick. It's not so hard, especially since he's despondent. Then regarding mental health, I said, and again, I always try to be face-saving. I would say, it's understandable that you would be sad. I wouldn't use the word depressed. That you'd be, because that's pathologizing. It's a label, and it implies automatic drugs, and automatically going to drugs and whatever. But if I said, are you, you seem pretty sad, right? Is that true? And he'll say, yeah. What, if anything, do you think would work? Would these previous things that we've talked about, improving these other aspects of your life, improve your sadness enough? Or is there more you want to do? Do you, I don't know if I'd have any specific suggestions, but I would listen a lot in that area, because mental health is so internal that it doesn't that's not subject so easily to external solutions. I'd be listening and asking probing questions. I'll say, when are you feeling saddest? When are you feeling optimistic? And see if we can get to some clarity. And finally, I might or might not, depending upon how. There are some people who are just very concrete and just want to deal with the day-to-day, getting through the day or whatever well. And there are others who are philosophical, who care a lot about the meaning of life. And I'll say, in your current state, what would you say is the meaning of your life? And what do you think is the meaning of your mother's life? And what is the meaning of your father's life? And then I would ask him, is that immutable? Do you want to change any of that? How would you change your sense of the meaning of life? Is it about more fun? Is it about work-life balance? Is it about success and moving up this ladder? To what extent? What do you believe about humankind? You've had it pretty tough. Are you pretty alienated from human beings? Do you think people are, generally bad, generally good, a mixed bag? What do you think? I might even say, I love my doggie, and it adds, as silly and shallow as it sounds, having my little doggie to love adds some meaning to my life. And so I just ask him those kind of things. Then I would ask him to summarize what he wants to remember. I'm not saying I would not ask for any commitments, because he's overwhelmed, he's depressed, I don't know, again, depressed may not be the right word, but he's beaten down. And I say, what, if anything, do you want to think about regarding your career? What, if anything, do you want to think about regarding your relationships? What do you want to think about regarding money? What do you want to think about regarding your physical health? What do you want to think about regarding your mental health? What do you want to think about regarding your avocations, your hobbies, your interests? And what, if anything, do you want to think about regarding the meaning of life? And then I would say to him, it's an honor to work with you. You're obviously at the cusp of not a cusp, it's wrong. You've been suffering a long time, and I'm honored that you would trust me with such profundity that's going on, and I'm here for you if you want to continue. Would you like to make another appointment? So that's kind of what I would do, and I'm hoping, of course, that if you or someone you love is thinking of disengaging from life, or already has disengaged from life, that they that maybe there's a nugget or two in this that may be of help to them, whether it be just an acceptance or in taking incremental steps. Occasionally, it can even be a dramatic, radical step that sometimes changes everything. On that positive note, I like to end every show with my favorite quote, which is, "We find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't."